There's easily a dozen different people in this story that are important in making this thing happen. And they're all at the main meeting, which happened at Valladolid. And Valladolid was one of the absolutely key cities in Spain at this point. There was a royal seat there. I mean, it was the capital of Castile. So yeah, as far as King Charles is concerned, it's one of, if not his main capitals. And it's here where Magellan has to sort of make his pitch. And it seems, I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it, that King Charles was already predisposed towards saying yes. But apparently Magellan's pitch was very convincing, and people were even bowled over a bit by his claims. Obviously, like any CV, you're going to put the best spin on it. I mean, you don't want to lie. I mean, Magellan does lie a little bit, but you know, you don't want to out and out lie and promise things you can't do. But you do want to put the best possible light on what your achievements are and what you're capable of doing in the future. But people were bowled over. Magellan basically says, I can be a new Christopher Columbus. What Christopher Columbus has done will pale in comparison to what I shall achieve and what I shall bring you. I will everything the Portuguese have achieved will be as nothing to what I can do for you. And he had a Portuguese friend called Francisco Serral, like an old chum who he'd travelled with over the years. And this Serral had travelled to the Indies from the east, obviously gone round the Cape of Good Hope, round the bottom of Africa, through the Indian Ocean, and had gone almost as far as anyone had gone, and had actually got letters back to Magellan in Europe about how great the Indies are, how amazingly rich they are, how there's all the Molucca Islands are full of spices, and it's all true. And if only you could get out here and share the wealth and fame, it's just a whole part of the globe which is just ready to be plundered. It's just here for the taking. It's just there for the pickings. So get out here as soon as you can. It's a paradise. These are all the things that Francisco Serral are telling Magellan. And Magellan tells that to this grand meeting at Valladolid and the king and Fonseca, the Bishop of Burgos. He tells them all this. He says, I've got first-hand knowledge. This isn't just rumour. This isn't just hopes and dreams. This is solid first-hand knowledge from a friend of mine who I know and I trust. It's there. Trust me, bro. It's there. Just give me a chance, coach. Just let me go. Let me do it. And of course they say yes. And here's a quote from one of Serral's letters. He said this to Magellan, quote, I have found here a new world richer and greater than that of Vasco da Gama. I beg you to join me here that you may sample for yourself the delights that surround me. Okay, so he starts picking his crew what he can. He's got one slave, Enrique, who's obviously 100% completely loyal to Magellan, an ultimate Magellan loyalist, follows his master everywhere, and if Magellan says jump, obviously he does without thought. So his favourite slave, Enrique obviously goes with him, but he sort of is of key importance because he can act as an interpreter, because he was originally from somewhere in Southeast Asia. They weren't sure exactly where he was from at the time, so we don't know. But they're hoping that if and when they get out there, he will at least have some ability to communicate with the people. I mean, we know that there's literally thousands of dialects in places like Indonesia and Malaysia and Southeast Asia. There's not one language. Nonetheless, to have any sort of leg up in the game of being able to communicate beyond dumb show with natives is a massive advantage, as proves to be. He actually took another female slave with him who's thought to have been from Sumatra. And Magellan starts sort of packing the crew with some Portuguese. As many Portuguese as he can, really. I mean, that's not fair. Not as many as he can, but far more than he must have known the Spanish would be comfortable with. Right, so right away, this thing comes up. The Spain versus Portugal thing. Okay, let me read another quick paragraph from Lawrence Bergreen. It is one of the best books, Over the Edge of the World. And he just talks about, in general, some of the elements, some of the most important topics that Magellan has to deal with. So Bergreen here quotes a contemporary of the time, somebody called Bartolomé Casas, who was at the grand meeting at Valladolid, who said, Magellan had a well-painted globe in which the entire world was depicted, and on he indicated the route he proposed to take. Bergreen himself says, reliable information about trade routes was so sensitive and precious that governments zealously guarded all maps and charts which were essential to national security, and for Magellan to display a map, likely purloined from Portugal, was the equivalent of selling nuclear secrets at the height of the Cold War. Magellan's conception of the world he planned to explore was fatally inaccurate. Like most explorers of the Age of Discovery, his ideas about the size of the globe and location of landmasses were inspired by Ptolemy, that is, Claudius Ptolemy, in the 2nd century AD. So, 1,400 years earlier. So, completely out of date and basically ancient and all kinds of wrong. Berggren continues, had Magellan comprehended the size of the Pacific, its currents, storms and reefs, it is unlikely that he would have dared to mount an expedition. But without the Pacific Ocean to inform his calculations, the estimated length of his route came to only half the actual distance. Magellan confidently predicted that it would take him at least 2 years to reach the Spice Islands and to return to Spain with ships bulging with precious cargo. All he would have to do was find a way to get around or through South America, and he would be at the doorstep of the Indies. This was nearly the same mistake that Columbus had made over and over during his 4 voyages, and it was a mistake that would be corrected only at the cost of great suffering and of many lives during the voyage Magellan now proposed. End quote. So the king and his immediate ministers say yes, and he palms it off to Fonseca and the Casa de Contracción. And the clash of personalities begins. First of all, Fonseca's not happy with what the king has actually said he'll do for Magellan. As far as the Casa is concerned, the king has been far too generous towards Magellan. Magellan asked for lots and lots of things, and the king has just said yes to them. Like, for example, Magellan has said, can I personally, Ferdinand Magellan, can I actually lay claim to lands and estates? Like, I will own them. I'll still own them on behalf of you, the king, and I'll still be your subject. I'm not going to set up my own kingdom, but I will personally own, like, whole islands, perhaps, potentially, vast swathes of the globe. I will be like, like the Duke of it or something. Well, Fonseca and the Casa don't like that because it's taking money and power out of their pocket, right? It's a zero-sum game. It's certainly a zero-sum game. Someone's got to control it and own it, and and Fonseca wants it to be him, and Magellan wants it to be him. It can't be both. And the king has basically said that not only can Magellan basically own and control a lot of it, not everything, but a lot of it, that it can also be passed down to his, quote, heirs and successors, quote. So it's like a full-blown hereditary privilege or title or claim, a hereditary claim to it forever. Fonseca doesn't like that, can't really have that. He's not going to have that. But the king has said it. So Fonseca, wily old power broker that he is, just goes about undermining it, just goes about undermining Magellan in all sorts of ways. The other thing the king had agreed to was that he wouldn't send another expedition for 10 years, i.e. basically giving Magellan or Magellan's voyage complete sort of exclusive rights. In fact, that's what it's called, 10 years of exclusivity. Gives them a good amount of time to sort of settle down, settle in, make their claims, hold on to their claims, rather than sending another expedition 6 months later or 1 year later or 2 years later, where someone else comes along and tries to claim potentially the same thing, and then there'll be all sorts of problems that could bring. So to prevent all of that, we'll give you exclusivity for 10 years. As far as Magellan's concerned, brilliant, perfect. Couldn't ask for more, really. As far as Fonseca and the Casa are concerned, that's terrible. We can't have that either. We want to be able to send out more expeditions if and when we can at all times. Send out one after the other, bam, 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 if we can, that are all loyal to the Casa, of course. So that's another thing that needs to be torn down, undermined, reversed, if they can. So there's lots of you can see there's lots of politics going on, all sorts of backroom dealings and interpersonal politics and backstabbing and under-the-counter deals and promises made and broken, etc., etc. About that 10-year exclusivity clause, King Charles, or rather King Charles's scribes, wrote that, quote, since it would be unjust that others should cross your path, and since you take the labours of this undertaking upon yourselves, it is therefore my wish and will, and I promise that, during the next 10 years, I will give no one permission to go on discoveries along the same regions as yourselves, end quote. Okay, a quick word now on the Treaty of Tordesillas. If you remember last time, that was that deal that the Pope struck between the Portuguese and the Spanish crowns, where there was that line, imaginary line, drawn from pole to pole, showing the Portuguese and the Spanish spheres of influence. And although both Spain and Portugal tried to undermine each other on that, they also, at least in public, at least for a while, try and abide by it, try to look like they're being seen to abide by it, even though both are trying everything in their power not to. King Charles says to Magellan, formally, on paper, because it survives, says to Magellan on that note, he says, "You must so conduct this voyage of discovery that you do not encroach upon the demarcation and boundaries of the most serene King of Portugal, my very dear uncle and brother, or otherwise prejudice his interests, except within the limits of our demarcation." End quote. So, again, on paper, public facing, abide by the Treaty of Tordesillas. In reality, do what you can, take what you can. Untold riches are up for grabs. So, what we say on paper and what you do in reality will be slightly divergent things. And on the topic of granting Magellan himself rights over lands, discovered lands, the Crown of Spain said, quote, "It is our wish and our will that of all the lands and islands that you shall discover, to grant to you the 20th part, and shall besides receive the title of lieutenant and governors of the said lands and islands for yourselves and your sons and heirs in freehold for all time, provided that the supreme authority," i.e. the king himself, us, "provided that the supreme authority shall remain with us and with the kings who come after us." End quote. So he's allowed to be lieutenant and governor of any lands he finds, and actually own 1/20th of it, which sounds a bit miserly, but actually think about that. That potentially could be a gigantic, right? Imagine if Magellan is thinking this, and it's not that far from the truth, that they're going to find something the size of a continent. They're going out to claim lands that is like all of Southeast Asia or something. So maybe not quite that much, but just giant islands, endless islands, maybe continental-sized lands. So to be granted 1/20th of that, that's giant, that's huge. Okay, Fonseca's not going to have that, and he's jealous, essentially. All right, so now, talking about the ships themselves, the 5 ships, he was given 2 ships of 130 tons, 2 of 90 tons, and 1 of 60 tons, equipped with crew, food, and artillery, to wit that said ships are to go supplied for 2 years, and they will pay for all the other people's necessary. And okay, these ships will put up pictures, of course, and you've seen them before in the first episode, but they're sort of covered in pitch, black pitch. Bergreen's description is, quote, "The ships were among the most complicated machines of their day, wonders of Renaissance technology, and the product of thousands of hours of labour by skilled artisans working at their specialised trades. They were relatively small, out of necessity. One of Seville's limitations as a port was the shallowness of the Guadalquivir River." That's the river that flows from Seville to the actual ocean, Atlantic Ocean. "Ships had to be sufficiently small and light to negotiate the narrow waterway to the Atlantic. Thus, Magellan's flagship, Trinidad, weighed 100 tons. San Antonio, which carried many of the provisions, weighed 120 tons. Concepcion, 90 tons, and Victoria, 85 tons. And Santiago, to be used for reconnaissance, weighed just 75 tons. End quote. We hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please head over to lotuseaters.com for the full unabridged video.